In this video, I shall be doing my absolute best to not spoil any particular part of this game. However, I believe that the definition of a spoiler should be left up to the individual person, since I know people's view on this varies quite a bit. So this is my warning. In this video I'll be going over aspects of Tales of the Abyss, Tales of Symphonia, as well as touch a bit on Tales of Berseria. Every time I hear those first few tunes of the song, I can't help but smile. I felt like this ever since I first beat this wonderful game. So, I thought I might as well try to convey what about this game I love so damn much. Tales of the Abyss is a part of Namco Bandai's long-running Tales of series, and it's the second entry on the PS2, as well as the 8th title overall. And, while not the most praised entry in the series, it's ultimately the game I went with. And I'll go into more detail as to why that is in a moment. So, I suppose to properly talk about why I love this game so much, I'd like to briefly mention how I even came to discover it in the first place. I just finished Persona 4, a game I played an unhealthy amount of, and I heard about Tales of Symphonia, but I wasn't a big fan of the combat of that game. So, I looked at what the best Tales of game was, and while a lot of people said Symphonia or Vesperia, I found a random post specifically talking about Abyss and why they thought it was the greatest of them all. The passion of this person and the points they made got me very interested in trying what they consider the best game in the series. So, I gave it a shot, and in the first couple of hours was introduced to a whiny spoiled protagonist with zero social skills, and an assassin turned ally named Tyr, who was attempting to bring him back to his family after they were both transported to enemy territory. This didn't really grip me at first, but what did was a real-time combat system which felt incredible, that let me string together combos and even pause the game to pick from any of my available moves besides the ones I'd assigned to the buttons of the controller. Also, the little subtle changes in this world brought as the adventure unfolded, eventually leading to one of the most satisfying character arcs I've seen in fiction. But I'm getting ahead of myself, so let's take it a step back and talk about the intricacies of this game I claim to be my favorite. As I mentioned, the story starts you off in the mansion of House Fabre, where Luke is training with his master Van, but soon sees him flung halfway across the planet into an ever-evolving world where he'll meet plenty of allies as well as enemies along his journey. While the story initially seems simple, it very quickly opens up and introduces more conflicts than initially conceived. And by the end of the game is so much grander in scale than one would have first thought. Although the world count time seems small, keeping focus on only a handful of locations and people at a time, it uses these locales in interesting and unique ways and has you visiting and revisiting places as they change, evolve, and adapt to the ever-changing world and plot. This smaller feel also makes it easier for you to get emotionally involved and invested with NPCs, and by the end you truly decide to protect them no matter the cost, and this lends itself to not only great impact in gameplay and story, but emotional scenes that truly tug at the heartstrings. However, it would be impossible for me to talk about why I like this game so much without going over a few of the characters, so I've decided to tell you a bit about the 6 main characters of this tale. So, without further ado, let's take a look at what's so great about this whiny spoiled kid of a duke's son known as Luke von Fabre. Well, as I've pointed out, Luke starts off as a whiny brat just relaxing in his mansion and training his sword skills as a hobby. Once he meets Tyr though, all that changes. Now he's in enemy territory, away from his safe home, having to deal with real combat. This leaves Luke somewhat vulnerable, since he's been locked up at his estate through the last 7 years of his life, which is made more apparent when he doesn't even understand the most basic functions of trade, like when he steals an apple without a second thought. A real pampered prince, if you will. However, this naivete leads to one of Luke's as well as the game's greatest moments, which is the first time Luke is forced to kill another human being, since unlike most JRPG protagonists where such things are second nature, to Luke it's devastating. The idea that he's killed another human is something he cannot come to terms with, and there isn't much support from his companions, who just urge him on and tell him to grow a pair essentially. While Luke initially refuses to kill, when Tyr's life is put in danger due to his hesitation, he resolves himself to fight for his own as well as his companion's survival, even if it means killing humans. However, he still refuses to take the life of someone he deems defenseless, as shown when he spares the life of one of the 6 god generals. I mentioned Symphonia earlier, and just because I like taking a jab at greatest game of all time, this trait cannot be found in Lloyd. In fact, Lloyd is perfectly fine with murdering pretty much anyone he deems an enemy. This makes Lloyd a less interesting and significantly less relatable character to me than Luke. Lloyd sort of feels like your typical anime protagonist most of the time, while Luke feels like a real person who's in no way prepared for anything going on around him. While Lloyd has his great moments, look no further than the coffee scene in Tales of Symphonia, Luke always feels real and his struggles feel justified. He also never really feels like he's in control of anything, while the center of the plot, the world doesn't revolve around him. Along the journey, there are even subtle hints of Luke turning for the better. In other words, into less of a pompous shithead. And watching Luke grow and change over time is one of the big reasons I love this game as much as I do. And it's also what makes Luke one of my favorite protagonists ever. Now then, I suppose it's only fitting to continue with the main heroine of this tale, Tia Grants. When we're first introduced to Tia, she comes off as a skilled, cold assassin attempting to take the life of Van. However, throughout the game we start to see her as a more layered character. One example is her affinity for cute things and her tendency to put her own life at risk for the sake of her friends.
You idiot.
The biggest reason for her development is the time she spends with Luke. While he was initially just a lost kid she was returning home out of duty, she comes to truly care for the brat, and even starts to develop romantic feelings for him. Seeing how Tia gradually opens up to the people around her is a very heartwarming thing, and watching her and Luke interact is a treat. It's a big part of what's so enjoyable about this game, since the relationship feels very grounded in reality. So yeah, seeing these two people who care deeply for one another is definitely an aspect of this game I absolutely adore. And with that, we move on to the best, well, guy. Guy is introduced as Luke's childhood friend, servant, wingman, and the resident charmer. Yet, despite being the most charming guy around, he's shown to have a strong fear of women that seems unnatural at first, something he often gets teased for by the other members of the party. But, for as much as he might seem like the cat's comedy relief guy, isn't one to be taken lightly, as just like everyone else, he has a deeply satisfying character arc that reveals he's more than he first seems. However, while arguably his best trait, Guy is more than just his charms, as he's shown to have a large knowledge of the world, as well as technology, and is even a master of the blade. So yeah, Guy's a great, well, okay, so that pun's not good anymore, but yeah, he's pretty chill. It also helps that he's voiced by the wonderful Johnny Young Bosch, who does an amazing job portraying the character.
Hey, don't give people the wrong idea. I love women.
I find in JRPG you can usually guess what sort of characters will make up your main party with a checklist of tropes. And what JRPG worth its salt would be complete without the adorable child character? So let's move on to Annis Tatlin. So imagine for a moment you find yourself being pursued by a very forward and aggressive 13-year-old. This is the situation Luke finds himself in when he meets the pint-sized gold digger Annis Tatlin. Greedy though she may be, Annis is charming, funny, bold, and above all strong, and in many situations the cast find themselves in, Annis manages to remain steadfast and level-headed, keeping a level of maturity that is at times missing from her older compatriots. Despite the negatives that are shown in Annis' character, she's hard to dislike because of how realistic she feels, and how she plays off the rest of the cast, acting as somehow both a little and big sister.
What do you mean, wasted time?
Because of who she is and how she's presented, she makes for one of the few child characters in JRPG I don't loathe with every fiber of my being, and who I'm happy was included in this game. Well, there's one trope that we're missing to complete our harem. Well, two, but I'll save her for last. So let's talk about him then. The aging and dying man, Jake Curtis. So, Colonel Jake Curtis is a bit of a, well, for lack of a better term, tsundere. Which, while that makes fun of the trope checked off our list, how does it fare for his character? Well, Jake, you see, is more than just a strobe. As if I need to explain that at this point. No, he's the greatest asshole who's ever lived. His sarcastic demeanor is incredibly entertaining, and on top of this, he's a highly esteemed general in the Makuthian military, so knows his stuff, which makes him the brains of the party in most situations. Jake enjoys making fun of people, and I personally find his insults quite amusing, but under that cold exterior is a guy who genuinely cares for his companions, even worrying over Luke several times throughout the course of the story. All this lends to one of the most entertaining characters in the entire cast.
Ah, it's so wonderful to see everyone come to understand one another.
So, we're almost done with the main six. And last but definitely not least, it's our princess, Natalia Luso Kinlaska Lamvaldir. Natalia is first introduced to us as the spoiled princess, acting demanding and seemingly thinking herself better than everyone else, a fact that is made worse by her spoiled attitude toward Luke and is supposed to belonging to her due to a childhood promise the boy can't even remember. But she very quickly finds a place in the party and realizes their attitude might actually be a hindrance. She has to be treated the same as anyone else. Soon, we see that though Natalia is a princess, she's no damsel, and despite her life as a sheltered royal, takes the time to learn things about the world and has no fear about going out to see her people face to face, a fact that earns her their devotion and praise. In Natalia, you begin to see the makings of a great leader, since she shows no fear in caring for the smaller things that others overlook. So, while she initially seems like an annoying brat who just wants Luke to bring her to a bedroom a little too much, she actually proves to be a very strong and capable character in her own right, leading to great interactions between her and the other girls, as well as other nobles. And her addition is perfect for capping off the party of the game.
I told you not to treat me as a princess.
However, while these six are the ones you spend the most time getting familiar with, the game is stuffed full of memorable and ever-intriguing faces. This rings true for our main villains who all have deep ties to the main party, making for some truly incredible conversations, as well as a sidecast from where one can find some of my favorite characters. To me, the world of Tales of the Abyss feels full of life, and I'd like to believe the music in the game is a big contributor in that regard. I remember that first time entering one of the major cities, Grand Kogma. It looks somewhat like an old Greek city, but the way water flows all throughout it makes it feel so fantastical. And the music accompanying this impressive piece of architecture helps it feel lively and sprawling in a way that's tough to describe. This song is sort of like something you'd hear at a fair, but also like an ocean moving. This union between visuals and music rings true for pretty much all the major cities in the game. Baticle's a city reaching for the sky, and so the piece accompanying it sounds imposing and makes you think of mountains or heaven itself. And Ketterberg, a town buried in snow, has a song that makes you think of falling snow on a Christmas day. So, while the locations themselves are a spectacle to behold, I don't think they'd have the same impact without their accompanying musical pieces. To me, there are lots of important parts to a game. And for one to be considered my favourite of all time, it has to tick quite a few boxes and do well in lots of areas, some of which I've gone over. However, one of the most important parts of a video game to me, maybe even more so than any other, is gameplay. And well, Tales of the Abyss has some very engaging gameplay. Combat system is an upgraded version of the Symphonia combat system, which sort of feels like a 2D fighting game where you move back and forth in a lane. But, unlike Symphonia, Abyss also has a free one mode which can be triggered by holding down a button and is my preferred way of movement, since it makes avoiding spells a lot easier. The face button layout gives you a basic attack, a block, and a special, as well as a menu button. However, you can also map 4 specials to the right stick in any direction. There are a couple of different types of attacks, including magic, but unless you're using a basic attack, they'll always cause TP to do. The main meat of the game can be found in chained together attacks and combos. Once unlocked, there are also Mystic Arts which can be performed when using Overlimit, which is triggered by holding down a button when your Overlimit gauge is full, and hitting the enemy with a special and holding down the basic attack button. Every character is given multiple Mystic Arts, and there are these huge finishers. Some even have to be unlocked through side quests, or can only be accessed in subsequent playthroughs. Magic in this game has casting time and can be interrupted unless you have a certain skill, and has multiple elemental properties from fire to light. However, magic and other specials can have the properties altered when used inside something known as a Field of Phonons, or FF for short. You can create a Field of Phonon manually with certain basic magic, or you can have them appear by using advanced magic, which always leads to an uncharged Field of Phonon. Certain specials also have this property. To activate this Field of Phonon, you then use another spell of the same element to charge the Field of Phonons, and then alter your special or spell you'd executed inside the Field of Phonon. This leads to combat always feeling fresh and very tug of war as well as risk-reward, since both you and the enemy can use the Field of Phonon left behind by attacks. It also feels amazing when you string together combos that utilize this system, since the game pauses for a second before FOF is activated, making the moment feel very impactful. As I said though, combat mostly consists of stringing together combos, which can consist of around 7 normal attacks and a total of 3 specials plus a Mystic Art, with the appropriate skill, which feels awesome to pull off. Every character is capable of this basic combo, unlike most JRPG where you'd have people who could do nothing but casting. Well, yes, characters who mostly specialize in magic obviously won't pull in huge damage numbers, because they hold their own in melee combat. Every character gets their own unique fighting style, and every caster has their own unique set of spells. This makes everyone feel different in battle, which is great, since it means there isn't a single member of your party that gets outdone by another. Personally, I found every single character a lot of fun to play, even if Jade or Tyr, who primarily are casters, proved a bit of a challenge, or Natalia, who's restricted to ranged combat only. I think it also helps that the game's enemies all have their own unique set of moves, so both you and the enemy fight with the same rule set, making for some very fun battles, especially when it comes to squaring off with some of the game's bosses. You also gain TP anytime you hit an enemy with a basic attack, so you don't always have to rely on potions to restore your mana like in other games. This makes for a very dynamic combat system where you can focus on the combat instead of constantly fiddling with menus. However, if menus are your thing, which I know they're mine, this game, as I mentioned earlier, lets you pause combat whenever you want to either use an item, run, check your inventory, or use any of the specials your character has unlocked. You can even switch to a different character mid-fight. So yeah, this combat system is fairly deep if you want it to be. But most importantly, it's very satisfying. The game also has your typical attack spells, healing spells, buffs, debuffs, status effects, and so forth, which makes combat just a bit more tactical. On top of all this, there's also Tyr, who has 7 unique specials that only she can use, those being the Phonic Hymns. These 7 moves have longer casting time than most spells in the game and have effects from healing to damage immunity to straight up damage. Once you use them, Tyr will start singing, and once she's done, the move will execute. I mentioned earlier about skills. These are unlocked by gaining points in certain stats by leveling up with a certain item called a Capacity Core equip, or something similar by leveling up, and can be anything from more hits in your combo to the ability to use Overlimit, or not getting staggered when casting spells to even getting a 3 revive that refreshes every combat, and these skills help spice combat up quite a bit. I'd also be doing this game a disservice if I didn't mention the fact that because the localization was released later than the original, content was added to it, like new Mystic Arts for certain characters as well as attacks for bosses. Which I wish would happen to more localizations since it makes that new version unique and makes the long wait a bit more worth it. I'd also like to touch on the fact that the game has some really great options menu. No really, I was surprised at how much customization there was to be found in the game on the PS2. For starters, there's 3 separate audio sliders. You're lucky if you can get a single audio slider in any game on console today. And later Tales games would see this replaced with a bloody star system. Which helps no one as a goddamn insult, though I have briefly bitched about that previously, and will continue to do so until this injustice is corrected, dammit. Anyways, my bitterness aside, the game even lets you remount the buttons for combat, another feature missing from most modern console games, and something I'd love to see become standard at some point in the future. Aside that, we've got options like turning off in-battle voices, text speed, and even the dynamic camera the game uses during combat, amongst others. The game lets you change quite a few things about it, and again, as I've stated, is something missing from the newest title in the franchise, Tales of Berseria, which is a fairly competent game in its own right, but has quite a few shortcomings and missed opportunities. But that game would be a whole other discussion altogether. A point is an options menu like Abyss should have been what set the standard, but instead it seems developers learned nothing from it and just went on to make lazy ones with little customization, a single audio slider if you're lucky, or in later Tales games case, fucking stars. I guess if I wanted to cap this off with anything, it'd have to be all the bonus stuff to do in the game. First of all, the game has a No Game Plus, which unlocks new quests and bosses to fight, including the most difficult in the whole game, way more so than the final boss. It also has one of the most interesting quest lines in the game, exploring more of Jade's past. However, while the side quests that leads to boss fights are great, the game also has plenty of minigames to mix things up, including a bunch of block puzzles that will reward you with items for doing well. And poker, which will reward you with coins you can exchange for prizes at the game's casino. You can also talk to any NPC at certain points in the story, and there's a very high likelihood they'll have something new to say after every major story beat. So yeah, I really like this game a lot. And, well, I hope we talk about it for this long kinda made you understand why in some way. I'm honestly not sure if I'm the greatest at explaining why I enjoy something, but I thought I'd give it a shot. So, if me talking about this game has made you at all interested in trying it out, I hope those first few tunes will end up putting a smile on your face as well.